Well, let's get started. Back to the history. What do these look like to you? These buildings. There's a lot of buildings in the distance. There's some kind of housing. Maybe you're thinking concentration camps. Oh, sorry, not this time. Try again. These are not concentration camps in Germany. If you saw the title of this video podcast, then you might know these are actually pictures of Japanese internment camps that were in the United States of America. This cartoon is actually kind of, I'm not sure if it's mocking the situation or if it's in favor of the situation, but it's showing here that we have a truck full of California-born Japanese citizens. So they're, I guess, American citizens since they're born in the U.S. They're loyal to the USA. However, they're being shipped away into a military zone out of harm's way. You got the American flag. You have some kind of fence going on. So this is definitely representing. This is from the San Francisco News, 1942. And it's a pretty good summary of what's going on. A lot of people claim that we're doing this to keep them out of harm's way. This is an odd picture. These Japanese American children are in one of the camps, but they're saluting the flag and saying the Pledge of Allegiance, ironically, for the country that's locking them away. So here we go, the Japanese internment camps from World War II. Oh, nice graphic, don't you agree? That took me 20 minutes alone. All right, so here we go. Let's get started with the information. This is after the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. Americans worried about the loyalty of Japanese Americans, or I guess you'd say non-Japanese Americans worried, white Americans worried about the loyalty of the Japanese Americans. Are they going to be spies everywhere? Especially people on the West Coast where more Asian American immigrants lived. So FDR got pressured into passing this executive order, which is, it's like a law. In times of war, the president can pass an executive order that has the effect of a law. And February 1942, it says it authorized the removal of 110,000 Americans of Japanese descent. And he put them into one of 10 different internment camps across the country. I'll show you exactly where in a few minutes. But 2/3 of those Japanese people were American citizens. The other third were living here, I assume, legally. It's just that they hadn't gone through the citizenship process and didn't take the test and all that. But they were all living here in the United States. Here's a picture showing a grocery store, I assume in California probably, and this man is Japanese American, and he's saying, listen, I'm an American. This is after Pearl Harbor, and he's saying, I'm an American. Stop harassing me. I know I am Japanese American, but nonetheless, I'm an American. So there's a lot of racism that these people faced. People thought, what's your deal? Are you all like this? Can we trust you? So this is pretty harsh. I hope you agree that this seems kind of harsh. I don't know if any of us would feel this strong to make these giant signs hang in front of our house or not. It seems like a lot of effort put into that. And this is a picture of one of those camps, one of those 10 camps in Arizona. Nice barbed wire fence, scary signs, also written in Japanese for their reading abilities. Here's a picture of some of the stalls they would live in. In this case, this one's a converted horse stall over here, and sometimes it'd be like 5 people in a 2-room apartment. And it's sad because these people were forced against their will. The Army gave them a letter, and they had about 2 weeks usually to pack up every single thing they owned from their houses. They had 2 weeks to sell their house. They had to sell their car, sell everything they could possibly sell, get as much money as they could for all their belongings. And they got to take, a suitcase or 2 per person and go to these camps. It's pretty scary because when we talk about the Holocaust, it sounds a lot like that. Now, of course, the Holocaust is going to result in people being tortured and put in slave labor camps and eventually murdered by the Nazis. There's none of that going on in these Japanese internment camps. Don't get me wrong. It's just that as far as people being forced to leave, citizens being forced to leave who hadn't really done anything wrong, it's similar at that early stage. Here's a picture of a family that was sent to one of the camps in Arizona. You notice here, They are holding a picture of a serviceman. So we'll get back to that in a second. Interesting picture. The kids forced to play in the open desert, basically. I mean, they had to set these camps somewhere, so the government used some of their government land in the middle of nowhere, like in the desert, and kind of below the mountains. Nice. This would be a nice, pleasant sign to see, I'm sure. But there's an option. It says down here, it says options: stay in camps or serve in the military. And it's kind of interesting that the young men who were American citizens were given the option of, hey, you can either stay in this camp as a Japanese prisoner, basically, or you can serve in the military. You can do the draft process. And an incredible amount of the Japanese boys or young men decided to do that and serve in the military, even though their country was kind of locking them up. They just thought they would fight for their country, maybe prove that they could do it and that they were loyal. And a lot of them got plenty of awards and accolades for all they did. But wow, ask yourself, would you be able to do that for your country if the country that was locking you up? Kids had to go to school. I mean, we're talking about 3 or 4 or 5 years, probably 3 or 4 years that these families are going to be sent away. So they have to provide these kids with an education to the best they can. And here is a very daunting picture of a prison within a prison. It says it's a steel cell block for 4 prisoners at one of the camps. These camps were located here, you can see, mostly in the western states. And the question is why? Well, it's just because that's where the majority of where Japanese Americans were located, on the western coast, because that's where you would immigrate from Asia. Check out this chart. You might have to pause it to get the results for the question you need on your worksheet, but you can show the different camps, and the first people arrived here. This is their peak population. This is when that happened, and then the dates that the people last left before the war ended. So while roughly 2,000 people of German and Italian ancestry were also interned during this period, definitely the Japanese were the hardest hit. And why is that? Think about it. Ask yourself the question. I think it seems probably because the Japanese appeared different physically. They appeared different, and so for the average white American, it's kind of easy to pick on them and isolate them. But did you ever hear about German or Italian camps? No. So something to consider. There were 2 Supreme Court cases that were brought against these camps and said, hey, this isn't fair, but both ended up ruling in favor of the government. So they stayed for the time being. But eventually, 1944, FDR rescinded or canceled Order 9066, which means he started to get rid of the camps slowly, gradually. In 1988, actually, the federal government issued a formal apology. I mean, this is decades and decades later, but they eventually apologized, and they said this was wrong, and they gave each survivor $20,000. And you do the math, $20,000 times 60,000 survivors equals $1.2 billion that the government is going to pay. And President Reagan signed it into law at the time. So I want you to think about this for tomorrow. We're going to talk about it in class. Do you think that Japanese internment was necessary because, for some reason, maybe just necessary because desperate times call for desperate measures? Or was Japanese internment a sad chapter in our nation's history? Or think about, at the time, if you were an American, you didn't know what the future was going to hold, were there more spies? Was it necessary? Or is it something we need to avoid in the future? I want you to think about that for tomorrow. All right, I hope you got everything you needed to know, and if you have any questions, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Make sure you take that 5-question quiz on Blackboard.